Turley joins the conversation. Hello to you. How significant is this legally? Go for it.
Well, it's very significant. This is not a small step for any committee in holding an official, particularly high-ranking official, in contempt. We have the added wrinkle that just occurred where the committee will do a direct referral to the Department of Justice rather than allow this to go to the floor where it would face a filibuster and a higher requirement of 60 votes in order to be referred to DOJ. That's going to add a complexity. That's going to add grounds for a challenge from the other side. The law behind this controversy is rather murky. People may be surprised that the cases in this area are relatively sparse. And so what Fauci is saying is that I'm really not protected without the privilege because there may be questions in ongoing state investigations or new questions that would put me at risk. What the committee is saying is that you have this sweeping pardon going back to 2014. And Chairman Paul specifically framed his final set of questions as only addressing matters within the confines of that pardon. So that's going to put into sharp relief for the court whether he truly has a right to invoke the privilege. What Chairman Paul is saying is that you can't be prosecuted for anything that you did or said during that period. All you could be prosecuted for is perjury. And you were always under that risk. All those previous hearings he testified in, he was under the risk of a perjury charge if he testified falsely. Even if he gets immunity directly from the committee, he has that lingering potential. And so what the committee is saying is that you don't have this privilege anymore because Joe Biden gave you that pardon.
So, Jonathan, how is this different then from the Lois Lerner case? This is a case that Republicans often bring up and make parallels to the IRS agent who was accused of going after the Tea Party groups when it came to taxes. She did the same exact thing. She did an opening statement just like Fauci, and then she invoked the Fifth. And she was never charged, or she was found in contempt, but was never charged and prosecuted by the DOJ.
Yes, of course, that was the Obama Department of Justice. This is now the Trump Department of Justice. But with Lerner, she did indeed, as you said accurately, give an opening statement. And many people believe that that is a waiver of the privilege. You're not allowed to give testimony and then invoke the privilege, because otherwise a witness could then pick and choose the questions they want to answer. You have to remain silent as to all questions. So the argument is that, like Lerner, you waived it. Now, in the Lerner case, they did hold Lerner in contempt in Congress, but the Obama administration refused to prosecute. It's not clear the Trump administration will take the same position. Now, all of these are issues that have to be hashed out in court. But one of the things I've emphasized is the right to do something does not mean it's the right thing to do. I think that what Fauci did was wrong. Millions of Americans lost loved ones during the pandemic. Thousands of businesses were put out of business due to these challenged policies. Academics were canceled and fired for opposing many of his viewpoints. They all deserve to hear from him. And, you know, he has more protection in this hearing than he did in the prior hearings. He has a presidential pardon. So while his contempt may be challengeable, I don't think his contempt for the public is.
Okay. All right, Jonathan, thank you so much. Good to get the legal side of this. Thank you, Jonathan Turley. I want to bring in Hugh Hewitt, Fox News contributor, host of the Hugh Hewitt Show. Hugh, always good to have you on. Couple things here that are new. Wall Street Journal headline, Senate panel says it's obtained a copy of Fauci's COVID-era phone. I guess that could be significant. Maybe there's a new investigation that opens up after that. They've got his diary. I'm not sure what else you would need. In a lot of ways, this crosses party lines. People like Bill Maher, for example. Roll it.
He was caught in actual lies. He was telling people, and the big issue to me is the origin of this, which is very important. How did it start? And he was telling people up front when it first began, it was from the wet markets. It could not, that's a conspiracy theory. If you say it escaped from the lab. And he knew better because we have him in his diary telling us what he was saying to other scientists who were saying, no, absolutely.
Senator Paul's been asked whether or not Fauci should be in jail. I think he sees that favorably. Does that ever happen? Or is this where the Fauci issue goes to not die, but end?
It goes into the refrigerator for a long time. Good morning, Bill. I listened to the exchange this morning very well, and Professor Turley covered the law well, as did Senator Hawley, not surprising, former Attorney General, former Supreme Court law clerk. But I think I have not yet found a lawyer who would not have advised Dr. Fauci to invoke the Fifth Amendment the way that he did. I would have advised him that if he was my client. He's not, thank goodness, because he's lied a lot. He lied to me in interviews I conducted with him. He lied on Fox. He lied everywhere. His diaries proved he lied it, but the committee's majority made the point, we have another pandemic coming. We have to figure out what to do and what not to do. So we need a deep and thorough searching inquiry into how to handle these things. And Tony Fauci is putting his legal self-interest, which I believe ultimately will be upheld. I don't think he has to incriminate himself. I think the Fifth Amendment applies. But he's putting that in front of the public interest in not having this happen again, especially when it comes to gain-of-function research. And did we sponsor it? And did he know that we sponsored it? And what about his lie about the masks and making up the 6 feet? We know he lied and lied and lied again. On the other hand, the Fifth Amendment does provide him with complete protection, and the pardon has a date. He's pardoned for everything prior to January 19th of 2025, excuse me. When he goes into the new testimony, it's not covered by the pardon. So if he's asked about future acts or about his testimony that day, he goes in peril of the criminal law. And this question about what about the immunity that he enjoys from the pardon for acts before that, where Senator Paul tried to land the plane at the end of the hearing, that question is of first impression. It's going to go over to the smart people at Justice, the Office of Legal Counsel. There's a whole office of lawyers who do nothing but think about cases that have never come up before. They'll make a recommendation to the Attorney General Blanche, or they'll send it to Jean Pirro, and she'll send it over to the Office of Legal Counsel. And there'll be some very illuminating issue. But the biggest problem here is we need answers on what to do with the next pandemic, which means basically everything we didn't do.
I think you make an excellent point there, Hugh, because I think that's what Republicans are trying to do here, right, is not really look back to the past, but try to prevent this from happening in the future. And the only way you can do that is by holding somebody accountable. And this country has not done that. We haven't even touched China, and we haven't been able to get any answers from our medical officials. But going back to that Bill Maher soundbite that we just played, you know, Democrats will say that he's a liar. Bill Maher came out and said he's a liar. But then Scott Galloway will then turn and say, well, let's give him a hall pass because he did so many great things back in the 80s with HIV, and he's a good guy, and there's a lot of people that are worse than him. What do you think about that?
I don't buy that. If I were the federal government, I would give him three kinds of immunity that a government can give a witness. I'd give him the most blanket immunity possible and sit him down and ask, what did you know about gain-of-function research and when did you know it? What did you know about the 6-foot distancing rule and when did you know it? What did you do to shut up critics of you and when did you execute that? Who was in on all this with you? What did Dr. Collins know? I would give him complete immunity so we could get this going. I am old enough to remember the 9/11 Commission, which was genuinely bipartisan. It was not in Congress. They got 11 people together who were respected by both sides, and we got to the bottom of how did 9/11 happen. We need to do that with a pandemic because it's coming around again. They happen every 100 years. 1920 was the Spanish flu. 2020 was COVID. It's going to happen again. Might happen sooner. We got biological agents out there. We got to get to
It's an excellent point. Thank you, Hugh. Thanks for coming on. I want to bring in Carrie Urban to get her take. Top line observation now, Carrie, about this or what's next. Go.
Well, I think there's a little bit of irony with respect to former President Joe Biden's role in all of this. So he gives him this blanket pardon, which, of course, there's some questions about still lingering out there with respect to the auto pen aspect of it and just the free-ranging nature of it. But it's Joe Biden's Justice Department that opened the floodgates for prosecuting contempt of Congress again. You know, Chad, in his excellent overview, gave a couple of examples of when the Department of Justice has, in fact, prosecuted contempt of Congress. But you should know that those are only like really the examples that exist. DOJ never in its history really ever prosecuted this crime. In fact, when I was at the Justice Department, to be frank, it was almost kind of a joke if someone was referred to DOJ for contempt, because we knew it wasn't going to go anywhere. It was just basically coming to us to die. But that changed under AG Merrick Garland when they prosecuted both Peter Navarro and Steve Bannon for their contempt of Congress. It's a little bit different, right? Because those were with respect to subpoenas regarding documents and appearances before the January 6th committee. So I would say it's a bit thinner than this issue of invoking the Fifth Amendment. But nonetheless, that's when this all really began again. So if this goes to Jeanine Pirro, there is some precedent that Joe Biden himself started in his department in prosecuting these kinds of crimes.
Wow. Well, let's put this DOJ piece to the side for a second. We'll see how that pans out in the next couple of weeks, months. We'll see how long it takes. I want to ask you about what's happening down in Florida, because the AG down there just sent a subpoena to Dr. Fauci. What are the potential legal challenges that Dr. Fauci could be facing when it comes to states taking up this challenge?
Well, the first thing I thought when the Florida AG appeared on our air, actually, America Reports just yesterday afternoon to announce these subpoenas, was I bet Anthony Fauci is now feeling pretty justified for invoking the Fifth Amendment. And his lawyer is saying, see, this is why I told you to do this, because there is some vulnerability with potentially with state charges and the like. Now, of course, there are issues of statutes of limitation, and of course, whether Florida and other states would even have the proper jurisdiction to bring these cases. But look, James Altmaier in his announcement yesterday talked about possible self-dealing and public corruption. I would think charges is what he's getting at, given that we now know that Dr. Fauci was pursuing this financial prize. At the same time, he was, dealing with all of this information and saying one thing to the public, but saying another thing behind closed doors. But I think, again, what this does is spotlights this Fifth Amendment issue and whether it was a proper invocation. And I think Hugh Hewitt laid it out very well that, this is a really important legal issue. And I think the committee needs to be very careful here in potentially setting precedent for watering down what is a very important right for all Americans.
Okay, interesting. All great commentary. Thank you. Thank you, Carrie. Thank you, Hugh. Thank you, Jonathan, wherever you guys are out there today. Talk soon. Thanks, Carrie.
Thank you.
Be sure to like and subscribe for all the Fox News latest on YouTube, and catch full shows streaming now on Fox One.